The Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get your free financial survival toolkit and find out where to buy gold and silver safely at great prices. Sign up at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
1490 WGCH. This is Kerry Lutz, and you're listening to the Financial Survival Network, which is brought to you by Miles Franklin. They've been in business selling gold since 1990, and I'm a customer because when you buy, they ship. To find out more, go to milesfranklin.com or call them at 800-822-8080 and get a free quote. This is Kerry Lutz. We're here live at Freedom Fest 2012 in the scorched meadows of Las Vegas. It just got done raining, and now it's 114 degrees again. And who better to talk to than Peter Schiff, who has been turning up the temperature on the politicians in Congress for years now. Hey, Peter.
Hey, how are you?
Doing good. I'm doing good. So I want to switch gears with you. We talked a number of times already. What is it exactly that you're hoping to accomplish? What is your mission when you go before Congress, when you do shows, when you're on the radio? What is it? What's your primary purpose?
Well, when I'm going to Congress, it's more of a purpose of educating and influencing the decision makers, although I know that I'm most likely not going to influence the congressmen that are in attendance. I'm more interested in people who might be watching a rebroadcast or on YouTube to actually see somebody articulate a case for the free market and trying to blame our problems on government, which is actually the source. Because I am confident that a real economic collapse is coming. I mean, much worse than what we went through in 08, 09. I mean, I predicted, that particular crisis, but I also said it was going to be the beginning of a much bigger crisis that would follow. And I want to make sure that there are a number of people that understand the real source of our problems, because there's going to be greater and greater calls for more government to solve the supposed flaws or failures of capitalism. It's not capitalism that's failing. We have a failure to have capitalism. It's the government that is failing. It's government distorting the markets and preventing capitalism from functioning. That's our problem. So when I'm doing a lot of that political, I'm trying to influence the national debate.
Yeah, well, trying to educate Congress is like a teacher trying to educate those F students in the back of the room. It's really an impossible undertaking. But do you ever get frustrated? Do you feel like sometimes the message isn't getting received the way that it should be?
Well, sometimes, but I know that most people in Washington are not there to do good for the country. They're there to do good for themselves. And, I don't mind people out to make as much money as possible and pursuing their own self-interest, as long as they do it in the private sector. The problem is when they're doing it in the public sector, they're hurting everybody else. See, an entrepreneur, a businessman, if he wants to go out and maximize profits, that's no threat to me. In fact, that benefits me. Because how does a businessman maximize his profits? By finding a way to satisfy my needs and my desires by giving me things that I want at lower prices than other people. So I don't have to fear a greedy businessman, because he helps me. I want businessmen working their butts off to satisfy my desires. But a greedy politician who's looking to amass wealth through the sphere of politics, that's a real danger, because he is using force. Now it's not a voluntary exchange. He makes me do things that I don't want to do and makes me buy stuff that I'd rather not have. So it's a real danger, and people don't understand that. For some reason, they're skeptical of greed in the private sector, but they forget about it in the public sector. But that's where it's a real danger.
Yeah, because they can confiscate your wealth, your property, take your life at the barrel of a gun. And yet, the country was founded, our founding fathers, on the principles of limited government, exactly trying to stop the thing that you just described, what Jay Taylor calls crapitalism, which it's not even crony capitalism, because there's nothing capitalistic about a system of cronies. And yet, here we are, 200-something years later, and everybody's forgotten the lessons of the founding fathers. So what do we do?
Well, we've forgotten the lessons of just a couple years ago, let alone from 200 years ago. We never can learn from our mistakes. We just constantly repeat them. And, unfortunately, we're going to ultimately have to suffer a huge catastrophe in this country. Maybe it'll be a wake-up call. Maybe, the shock therapy will get us to understand. But it's also very dangerous, because we could abandon what's left of capitalism completely, saying it doesn't work at all. forgetting about history and just embracing the complete failed socialist ideology of a totally centrally planned economy. And so that, that is the fork in the road that I think we're headed to. That's why, I wrote my book, The Real Crash, that's out there to educate. Of course, I'm also a businessman. I'm promoting businesses. I have a brokerage firm, metals company, a foreign bank. So I am looking to try to increase my businesses, to look for customers who are philosophically in tune with my philosophy and want to invest their money along those lines, and they want me to help them do it.
And the government keeps putting up more and more obstacles for you to satisfy the market's needs. And I think Reagan said we're never more than a generation away from losing our freedom, because do people really know what freedom is in this country?
Losing our freedom. The question is, how much of it do we have left?
Yeah, that's a good question, because, I was flying down to Florida a couple of months back, and I looked out the window at the South Carolina-Georgia border, and I looked down, and there's a Predator drone flying there, surveilling the coast. And that, to me, was, I don't know why I was shocked, but seeing it was a shock.
Yeah, and we're going to be becoming more and more of a police state as the growth of government continues to impoverish a nation, and people look for alternatives, look for a way out, and the government reacts to that, because the more bad laws there are, the government creates criminals, because, if you don't want to abide by these bad laws or unconstitutional laws, well, then you're a criminal. And so, but the worse the laws are, people want to abide by good laws, right? Don't steal, right? Don't murder, right? These are good laws. And so it's not, people want to abide by those laws. Now, some people don't, but as you start, going down and down the hierarchy, as the government's starting to mandate all these different things and taxing you and regulating you, people don't want to comply, and they can see the damage that the laws and the regulations are doing. That, laws against theft and murder make our lives better. But most of the laws and regulations that the government is passing are making our lives worse, and people can see that. And so, but as people want to resist these bad laws, the government now gets more oppressive to try to stop all the criminal behavior. And eventually, people want to leave, and they've already got these big exit taxes. They just raised the cost of the form. If you want to give up your citizenship now, it's $500. It used to be, this form was free. And also, you can't claim as a reason to give up citizenship taxes. You can't say, I'm giving up my citizenship because my taxes are too high and I want to move to a country where taxes are lower, which to me, the best reason to give up your citizenship is taxes. I mean, after all, think about it this way. Why are we Americans? The founding fathers all gave up their British citizenship over taxes. They didn't want to pay the British taxes, and so we had a revolution. They renounced their citizenship with a bayonet. And now, if they're prodigy, if they want to leave for the same reason, because now the taxes are so high that it's intolerable, why can't you leave? Because leaving over taxes is leaving over freedom. I mean, if you can't give up your citizenship because of taxes, what if they make the tax rate 90%? We're stuck.
Well, Judge Learned Hand said the power to tax is the power to destroy, and you look at it.
Unfortunately, we're proving that.
And the power to regulate and the power to do anything the government does. But then you got like the other side of this spectrum, like the Doug Caseys, who believe that anarchy, creative anarchy, is the way to handle this situation. And what do you say to that?
Well, look, obviously, our government is helping to make the anarchist case every day, right? I mean, so anarchy looks more and more appealing when you compare it to what we've got. The only problem with anarchy is it's like a vacuum, right? It doesn't, it's the minute you have one, it's filled. So while anarchy can be great in theory, in practice, the minute you have anarchy, you get government. So my theory is, let's establish a government of very limited powers to prevent one from greater powers from being formed to fill the vacuum. So I would be an anarchist if I thought that we could actually have it, but I don't think we're going to have it. And so I think you want to be preemptive. You want to recognize that government is a necessary evil and establish one that does the least amount of damage. And I think that's what the Founding Fathers did originally by binding the government in the change of the Constitution. They created a very weak federal government with very few and defined, limited powers. And we prospered for, well over 100 years under that document. It wasn't until, with the progressive era around the turn of the 20th century that we just really started to move away from that. But there was still we were mostly free and mostly capitalist, but then you had Roosevelt's New Deal, then you had the Great Society stuff from Lyndon Johnson, and now where we are now, I mean, it's a complete mirror image of where the Founding Fathers wanted us to be, and that's why we're imploding.
Yeah, that's a great point. And throughout history, we've seen limited government work on a number of occasions, but we've never seen anarchy work. And just getting to the nanny state, to my way of thinking, it started with prohibition. Because that was the first time the government said, you can't take this substance because it's bad for you. And now we got Bloomberg outlawing big gulp sodas. Where the heck does it end?
Yeah, but at least they had the integrity to amend the Constitution first. They understood that constitutionally the government didn't have the power to do that, and so they actually had enough respect for the document to amend it first. You know, we should have done something like that with Obamacare, but of course, why when the Supreme Court simply rubber stamps it anyway, even though it's clearly unconstitutional?
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully when this collapse does come about, your work and the work of others will point people in the right direction and say, here's why it happened. It happened because of socialism, collectivism, not because the free market, which is true capitalism, and people being free to pursue their own best interest failed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the big problem is the government infects capitalism. It screws it up with regulations and subsidies and taxes that distort it, render it, impotent, and creates all these problems. And then when you have the inevitable crisis, they blame it on capitalism. Oh, see, capitalism doesn't work. It would have worked if they would have left it alone, but they short-circuited all the signals and prevented it from working. Just like, like in the housing market, the government guarantees all these mortgages that never would have been originated. The free market would have, allocated credit based on risk. But the government says, don't do that. We're going to guarantee these loans. And so, you get too much money going to housing or students now. The government guarantees student loans. So a lot of students borrow money. But who doesn't get money now? Because it's been redirected by government. And so we need market forces regulating and distributing capital, not government.
Yeah, and just one final thing. The banks, the too big to fails, and all the institutions wouldn't exist now. They're not a product of capitalism. They're a product of government.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they're the poster boys for capitalism. It's the big banks, it's the Goldman Sachs, the Morgan Stanleys that everybody thinks about when they think about capitalism, and they see all the damage that they're doing, and they don't understand that there's nothing capitalist about these institutions. They're creatures of the government. This is, this is fascism. It's, corporatism. But the one thing it's not is capitalism. They're not capitalists. They're in bed with the government. If there was capitalism, most of these big FAMs would have failed, and they wouldn't be here anymore.
Yeah, and we'd be free of them. Schiffradio.com.
Schiffradio.com. I do that show every weekday from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Standard. So just check it out, schiffradio.com. And my website, europac.net, is my brokerage firm. And europacmetals.com is my precious metals company.
All right. Excellent, Peter. Thanks for being on. Always a pleasure.